everybody, it's Sherry Dutterer, your classroom coach. I am here today at Tier 1 Interventions podcast. My sister podcast is The Writing Glitch. And this past week, we offered some really amazing things on both podcasts. On Saturday Math, it was such a powerful conversation that we aired the entire hour and a half episode on Tuesday. And on Thursday, we aired Impact Wednesday, which was a follow up to that session. The conversation on in Saturday Math was about cognitive science of math and what are some of the terms that jonely and I use when we are teaching the instruction methods that we are teaching. And that is spaced repetition, interleaving, spaced practice, and cognitive feedback. I hope I got them right.
The biggest component of improving number sense is counting. The foundational gap filler for any math deficit is counting. So we're going to take counting to the extreme today. We can do that in many ways, but today we're going to take counting to the extreme with staircase. I'm going to back up and layer two other intros before we answer that first question with staircase. The Tier 1 interventions topics is staircase. I want to go into what staircase looks like in season 1. The staircase, which is the counting and the number sense. Tier 1 math interventions, reference task number 8 of the Dirty Dozen is the staircase. And the staircase is like a quick dot. The quick dot module is another module. If you want to watch and listen to that if you're watching the recording of this, you might want to pause the staircase recording and go listen to the quick dot module because you'll get the foundation of what a quick dot is. I'm not going to re-explain that here, but I want to make that connection. Also, in this staircase chunk, I remind us of all of the Dirty Dozen, the 12 reference tasks that are exactly the same from preschool through high school for every grade level and every course. They're the exact same task, but they vary depending on the standards of the grade level and the ability level of the students in that grade level that we are exposing the task to. And for our non-math and our non-academic and our support staff, and really for our parents and our interventionists and those of us that are trying to improve executive functioning with kids, improve fine motor, improve visual processing, for those of us that are trying to just help kids function, and that is our main objective and goal for our students, not necessarily the math. These 4 focuses that we're going to go through today in presenting the staircase problem are exactly what those stakeholders need.
The executive function parts of the brain go around these spots that are getting turned on. It's the center of the frontal lobe gets turned on and the outside gets turned off. The outside is what is controlling executive function, emotional connection. There is a couple parts there that, depending on what the situation is, may get turned on or off. But the idea here is the brain is looking for automaticity, which is one of the foundations of counting. And now we talked a lot about when we were talking about the locker problem. It's that automaticity and counting, which is what we're trying to get to today with the staircase, is automaticity and counting.
Don't let kids engage too long during the first interaction. Here is the key to focus and flow. And then here is the key to building independent problem solvers, which is our next question. How do we individualize so that kids can work independently? Let's think about that through the staircase. When I bring this back to kids because I want kids to be able to do things independent. I want them to be able to go exploratory, but they can only do that if they're at the just right level. The Goldilocks principle in mathematics is I can't give kids something that's too difficult. I can't give them something that's too easy. I have to give them the just right prompt. The issue is in my class of 28 students, there might be 16 different just right prompts. So I give all of these prompts to everybody so that everybody can work independently. And I'm actually individualizing with a whole class lesson and not stations or centers. When I bring
Can I
this
stop you
back,
there?
yes, go ahead.
Before you get into the mathematics, I also want to indicate that there is a just right level as far as the neurological system goes. We have inhibition and we have excitement, and we have these kids on this continuum, and there is a just right neurological engagement, and that will have them just right to learn. So thinking about a neurologically, a just right to learn, there is a position in the way the brain is structured that will engage them to learn. And it has to do with engaging into and out of flow. It has to do with challenge skill ratio. Are we going to challenge them just enough, or are they going to snap into frustration? So understanding that just right level isn't just mathematics, it's also neurological. Sorry, Jonely.
Oh my goodness, please keep bringing those connections in because I think the beauty of Cheri and I's partnership is I could go teach on all the math. Cheri could go teach on all the brain. But if you learn those things separate without the connections, we are never going to make the movement happen. Just listening to the math separately and just listening to the brain separately is not going to fully move us forward and transcend, create a path that hasn't existed. The reason that Cheri and I toggle back and forth is the only way that we're going to make this happen. I love it. When I bring back staircase, I'm going to give kids some parameters. I'm going to explicitly tell them some things now. And one of the things I'm going to say to them is, in a moment, you're going to get blocks in play. And this first image that you see, this first image here, I'm going to actually call stage 2. And the reason is it's 2 blocks tall and 2 blocks long. So I'm going to explicitly give kids parameters now. And then I'm going to say this next image is stage 3 because it's 3 blocks tall and 3 blocks long. And then Natalie, you were correct earlier when you were saying we're missing some stages. There's a gap in the pattern. Then I might say to students, I might now ask them an answer getting question, and I'm going to confirm it because I'm trying to solidify the rules of this pattern. This is the toggle method between explicit and exploratory. I'm going to say, what stage is this? And then when students answer, now, Kirk, I might say no here only because I want to confirm a wrong answer, even though I've already validated student thinking. Right now in my explicit instructional moment, I want kids to know that this is not stage 7 and that it is stage 8. But I'm thinking now, because Kirk, you have me thinking a lot always. What I probably could do if kids are like, oh, stage 6, I should just use my own advice. That would be the smart thing to do, jonily, Jay-Z. And I should just say, oh, tell me more about that. How did you know stage 6 instead of saying no? Kirk, I have learned from you today and I will be better because of you. So anyway, when kids are like 8, then I'm going to say, oh, tell me more about that. How did you know? I'm going to respond the same way. Remember, we're at the poker table. When is she bluffing? And so then finally, I'm going to confirm and say, yes, this is stage 8 because it's 8 tall and it's 8 long. And see that toggle? See that toggle that had to have happened? Then I'm going to say, now that you know those parameters, what else do you notice and what do you wonder about and what math questions can you create? Interaction 2 and interaction 3 actually now move kids to the second phase of functioning. And that is, how do I get kids to work independently? The question that we really should answer is, how do we individualize for them? The bigger question is, in the tier 1 core general classroom, how do we differentiate for 16 different levels of learning? I've just shown you how to do that. And then when we get to what math questions can you create, when kids are creating questions and when I'm creating questions, those are the questions that are going to naturally differentiate the exploration. So now we have this big list of questions that we're going to solve and answer get. And I'm going to give kids blocks, and they're going to build blocks, sensory, tactile, hands-on. And I'm going to give them grid paper where they're going to draw the staircases they build with the unit squares on the grid paper. This is where Cheri and Teresa come in with their occupational therapy adaptations, where we use grid paper that has thicker lines or grid paper that has larger squares to adapt. All of my struggling kids or kids that have learning disabilities can still be in the tier 1 general core classroom, but the occupational therapist can be in there adapting through the types of graph paper, the thicker lines, whatever it is. Those stakeholders can adapt so that kids can have access to the same mathematics, and we can individualize for them in whole group instruction in the same tier 1 core general classroom, where the teacher is there, the intervention specialist is there, the special ed is there, and then the special service provider is there. All of the adults are in the same room at the same time, and every kid is getting what they need. That, my friends, is what full inclusion is all about. We're
And
trying
that
to
is
go ahead.
and that is the foundation of impact, inclusion, metacognition, perseverance, adaptability, confidence, and transcendence. So one of the other things that I was thinking about as you were talking about inclusion and adaptations and accommodations, and that is some kids may have trouble fine motor wise to pull those bricks apart, whatever those cubes are. You may need to get blocks that don't interlock. For some students, they're going to have to be laying it down unless you get some bigger blocks that they can stand them up. So even those one by one old wooden blocks can be used for staircase. But I love when I make adaptations out at the dollar store. And my adaptations are that silly sponge. And that silly sponge really does make a difference. So I got to tell you a story about, and I even make the pieces smaller than that. But I have to tell you a story about my friend Dylan. Dylan was in kindergarten when I was first learning about these reference tasks. So we have ESY going on. So I made it my mission to try and problem solve how to work with a kid using the staircase. And I did the whole thing incorrectly because I didn't do interleaving with it. But every week we came back to staircase for 6 weeks, trying to help this kid understand it. So we got out the grid paper. I sent him sponges because this happened during COVID. So I sent him sponges in the mail that I had already pre-cut. And we were trying virtually to get him to understand staircase and using the sponges, because I didn't have enough blocks to send through the mail. Mom didn't have enough blocks on hand. And we were trying to get him to understand it and look at it from a kindergarten's perspective. He was able to make the associations to creating the stage as if I had a stage that mom was able to print out, and he was able to copy the stages using the sponges. He was able then to translate that copy onto the grid paper. However, I think if I would have been able to be in person with him, it would have been a different story. And if I would have tried interleaving and knew more about the reference tasks, I would have started at the locker problem.
I want to point out in the Tier 1 interventions course, and if you're here live, you have access to all of this. In the Tier 1 interventions course, if you go to this module, reference task number 8, staircase, there are many audio sessions that you can listen to from, there should be kindergarten through algebra, of me facilitating the staircase with these students at many different interaction levels. What you're also going to find here is my slide deck that I'm showing you. I already had that open, but you'll find that slide deck here. What you'll also find is a snapshot of all of the standards that relate to the staircase problem from kindergarten all the way through. Now, in Tier 1 interventions course, we are not scaling the mathematics as much as we will next year in year 2. So next year in year 2, we're going to come back to each of the reference tasks and up level it mathematically. So if you're a high school teacher or a secondary teacher and you're like, jonely, you've been talking to us now for an hour and a half, and I only have 3 minutes of lessons to do with my kids. Yeah, that's the point. That's the point. Because all of this other stuff is so important for you to learn to implement staircase that I'm not apologizing for taking the process slowly. If it's October and it's your 8th grader's second interaction with staircase, and all we're doing is creating math questions, that's all we're doing. Now what happens is all of my kids have been exposed to this at least twice. Now after they've had at least 2 exposures to this, now we can begin to scale the mathematics. So if I go back to my math seasons, we haven't done a ton of mathematics, really deep mathematics in these 2 exposures. Or maybe we have, because as you get better as a teacher, you can do so much more in exposure 1 without giving things away. And you'll hear on some of my audios, I was in a 7th grade classroom yesterday doing locker problem. It was the students' first exposure, but we got to some of the questions that I usually do in the 8th exposure. So there's a lot of flexibility here. But when you're first learning this and first implementing this, please do not speed it up and do not push it. Do not push the mathematics. I want you to lay the foundation for the experiences, the thinking, the reason, the sense making, the emotions, the vulnerability. That's what we're building when you first start implementing this as a facilitator. Once you start to get better at it, then we can get more math done in less time. I want to point out another part of the 5 seasons, and that is one of my favorite seasons. Actually, when we're recording this, we're in this season right now. It's January of the school year. And this January sliver, when we come back from winter break, this January sliver is called Math in a Month. This is season 3 in our math year. This is the January sliver. It's called Math in a Month. It is a replication of the first 15 days. The very day we came back from winter break, in 2 of my schools, I launched and implemented in my 3rd grade classroom and 7th grade classroom in 2 different schools. Every single day in January, another new task that they've seen in the first 15 days. So if they saw locker problem here, maybe they saw locker problem in November, and now they're going to see locker problem again here. So this might be the third interaction. If I go back to green staircase, hopefully my kids would have first been introduced to staircase here. We created math questions for staircase here. Now this month, here's what my kids are doing with staircase. Now I'm going to go back now. I didn't want to stop sharing. I'm going to go back now to my slides. And we're going to go back to our focus questions today. How do we make, we already answered this. We already answered this one. How do we make math accessible? We just talked about all of those adaptations. So I got ahead of myself on here. How do we make math accessible? Sponges, blocks, grid paper, thicker lines. Have a great weekend. Love y'all. Bye, everybody.